Title of my talk today is A Framework for Assessing Technologies Across Cultures, Cultural and Technological Agnosticism in Ethical Decision Making. My name is Rockwell Clancy. Today I'll be describing a framework for assessing the ethics of different types of technologies across different types of cultures. By agnostic, I mean two things. First, independent of the technologies considered, so being able to say a technology is ethical or not. Second, independent of the culture in which the technology is employed. Nevertheless, this framework is responsive to the particularities of both the technologies under consideration and the cultures in which they'll be employed. My presentation today will be divided into three sections. First, I'll talk about background. Second, I'll talk about this framework itself or the method. And then finally, I'll talk about the outcomes. This presentation today is based on a series of earlier articles, so if you're interested in learning more, feel free to check out any of these or contact me afterwards and I'd be happy to send them to you. Section 1, Background. Motivations for this project. Ethics has been recognized as crucial to innovation, evident in professional codes and educational accreditation guidelines. However, the global environments of contemporary technology present challenges to ethical innovation. Technology spans multiple cultures and countries, resulting in potential disagreements about appropriate and inappropriate courses of action involving technology. This can be based on different regulatory frameworks or different cultures. Technology is intrinsically novel in nature, resulting in the development of different types of technologies over time, such as building, transportation, AI technologies, and it can be hard to determine ahead of time right and wrong, good and bad regarding these technologies. As a starting point to understand these problems to potential solution, we'll begin with engineering ethics. The origins and nature of engineering ethics. Engineering ethics began in the US and has been an overwhelmingly normative enterprise with pedagogical aims. What does this mean? It means it's primarily concerned with prescribing right versus wrong courses of action in engineering and concerning technology. Normative. In addition, it's concerned with learning about professional codes and or Western ethical theories and then applying these to resolve ethical issues in engineering and with regard to technology. Empirical research in engineering ethics has examined the effects of ethics education on ethical understanding and reasoning. There are two main problems with this. Problem number one, ethical judgments are neither exclusively nor primarily the result of ethical reasoning or the application of ethical principles, and behaviors are influenced by small, seemingly insignificant unconscious factors. Problem number two, people from Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, or weird cultures like those in the United States, are outliers on psychological and social dimensions, including thought styles, self-concepts, and ethical reasoning. Scholars have identified different solutions to these problems, although these have their own problems in turn. Regarding intercultural digital ethics, Charles S., for example, writes, it must first defend some set of quasi-universal ethical norms, principles, frameworks, etc. I'll refer to this as a universalist perspective, while also, two, sustaining local, culturally variable identities, traditions, practices, norms, and so on. I'll refer to this as particularist. Chin Zhu and Brent Jesiak have recognized a similar dichotomy within their four different approaches to global engineering ethics. First, global ethical codes, functionalist theories, and global ethics and justice approaches to global engineering ethics will all be universalist in nature in the way that S means them, and two, cultural studies, which would be particularist in nature. However, both of these approaches have potential problems. First, universalist approaches consist in identifying core cultural values shared by individuals and communities across cultures, but this can lead to the possibility of homogenization. However, Particularist approaches using non-Western theories, including more culturally and geographically diverse cases, can lead to a fragmentation or balkanization within ethics. To avoid both homogenization and balkanization, or to have the best of universalism and particularism, any framework for assessing the ethics of technology would need to have three main characteristics. First, be general enough to address novel technologies and be appreciated by individuals and organizations across cultures and countries. This would be universalist in nature. Two, narrow enough to address specific cultural and technological concerns and affected stakeholders. This would be particularist in nature. And three, realist in nature, cognizant of and capable of incorporating empirical findings regarding how people think about matters of right and wrong and how these are affected by culture. So this would be universalist and particularist in nature. Section 2, Method. The alternative framework I'm proposing today would be a bottom-up, iterative method for identifying, resolving, and avoiding ethical problems related to global technologies. In other words, a case study procedure. This procedure would begin with case studies capturing situations or dilemmas involving technology, and then particularizing relevant frameworks and principles to the technologies and situations under consideration, thereby refining general ethical principles in the process. For example, differentiating between privacy on a personal computer versus a smartphone, and what this would mean in the US versus China. For those unfamiliar with case studies and the case study procedure, there's a broad distinction between what are known as micro ethics or cases and macro ethics or cases. The Challenger space shuttle disaster might be a micro case, whereas global warming would be a macro case. Micro cases typically deal with a smaller number of stakeholders, whereas macro cases would deal with a larger number of stakeholders. Micro cases deal with individuals, whereas macro cases deal with groups. The effects of micro cases would be more immediate, whereas the effects of macro cases would be more long-term. And micro cases involve individuals and or fewer organizations, whereas macro cases involve organizations and or more organizations. There would be 10 steps in this case study procedure. First, identifying ethical issues. Second, narrowing the focus to one or a couple of particular ethical issues. Third, determining relevant facts and missing facts. Fourth, making reasonable assumptions about missing facts. Fifth, undertaking definitional or conceptual clarification. Sixth, conducting ethical analyses. Seventh, reviewing the process. Eighth, resolving the issue or answering the question. Ninth, identifying practical constraints. 10th, avoiding ethical issues in the first place. This framework has the following characteristics that would make it appropriate for use in cross-cultural and international environments. First, it begins with case studies rather than principles. As a result, there would be a common basis for understanding or consideration of ethics between peoples from different cultures. Second, it begins with intuitions rather than reasons, reflecting the ways that people actually think about ethics. Ethical judgments are based primarily on intuitions rather than reasoning or the application of principles. Third, the principles that are used in this process reflect judgments of professionals as well as empirically informed and pluralist theories of ethical reasoning, such as moral foundations theory and morality as cooperation. And fourth, this framework is pragmatic in nature, making recommendations about how technology should be developed or implemented rather than simply passing judgment on it. This framework has the following benefits. First, it familiarizes students and practitioners with the contents of ethics in engineering. The definition of ethics with which it works is actions that have the potential to have a serious impact on the lives of others. On the one hand, this definition is good because it's broad, vague, and general, allowing us to encapsulate lots of different types of technologies and cultures. On the other hand, it's broad, vague, and general, and it needs to be particularized with regard to case study contents. The definition of engineering with which this framework works is engineering consists in the application of technology to make people's lives better or leave them no worse off. This emphasizes two critical features of this framework. First, that technology is novel and it can potentially create new problems. And second, that engineering itself is value-laden. It's always about improving people's lives or at least leaving them no worse off. Second, this framework cultivates moral awareness insofar as it teaches practitioners and students to develop moral awareness, what we mean when we talk about right and wrong, good and bad within engineering and regarding technology. And then second, ethical reasoning. It allows students and practitioners to resolve ethical dilemmas once they've identified these. Teaches students and practitioners to do so in a step-by-step manner, reducing confusion. Third, it hones critical thinking skills and facilitates active learning. Engineering is similar to ethical reasoning insofar as, in most cases, there's no one absolutely correct answer, but there are better and worse answers along a continuum, like design thinking. Section 3, Outcomes. This framework has been used in countries as diverse as the US and China for computer, mechanical, electrical, and material engineering, resulting in demonstrably higher levels of ethical reasoning and increased moral intuitions. It contributes to the development of practitioners and organizations capable of effectively addressing global challenges, fostering more inclusive, technological perspectives that identify and incorporate potentially marginalized perspectives. We would like to develop this framework further with more different types of educational institutions in different places, as well as with industry partners. Feel free to contact me or my colleague Chin Ju at our email addresses. Conclusion. Today's presentation described a framework for assessing the ethics of technology across different types of technologies and cultures. It was divided into 3 parts. First, I talked about some of the background of this framework, the fact that ethics is crucial to technology, but this creates problems across different disciplines and cultures. Second, the method itself, which is a bottom-up, empirically informed case study procedure. Third, the outcome. This has been used to good effect in both the US and China, and we'd like to use it elsewhere.